Hi, today we're going to get a bit personal with Dr. Aart de Geus, one of the storied pioneers of the semiconductor industry, having founded Synopsys in 1986 and leading it for nearly 38 years. He's also known as the father of EDA. EDA is electronic design automation and is one of the most critical supply chain partners in the semiconductor ecosystem. For those of you not in the industry who may not know Aart, you're going to love this episode because it's going to break all stereotypes about who the leaders are that matter in Silicon Valley. In some ways, he is the soul and conscience of the semiconductor industry. He's one of those individuals who leads and lives by a set of deeply held values. Please join me in welcoming a soulful blues musician, a deep-thinking philosopher, and an actively deliberate philanthropist. Welcome to A Bit Personal. Aart, thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you for being here.
And thank you for inviting me into your recording studio. This is so cool.
I hope it works for you. And there's music behind us. So
okay,
here we go.
Perfect. So tell me a little bit about how often do you come in here?
Well, I try whenever I'm home to at least play 15 minutes or so. You know, if you come super charged from work, nothing better than being able to crank a guitar up a bit and the stress comes down. But I wish I could play way more.
And you also perform. So tell me about your band.
Yeah, we have a band, Legally Blue, and we do about a dozen gigs per year or so. But the gigs are like 2.5 hours, 2 times an hour, 15 minutes, which is a lot of material to actually get on top of.
So where do you play?
Oh, a lot of things that are outdoors.
Okay.
And, you know, some of our favorites are, for example, in Sunnyvale closes Main Street, and then they put tables so people can eat there and a stage. And then we play the evening.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, it is really cool.
It's so fun. So you and I have had the opportunity to know each other for roughly 20 years.
That long? Really? Yeah. Okay.
Which means we both started as teenagers.
Yeah, I was thinking kindergarten, but okay, yeah, that's fine.
Teenage prodigy.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, so during that time, I've learned a lot of lessons from you. And some of them have been things that I've observed, but some of them have been point blank lessons that you've taught me, things that you've told me.
Well, some of that material has come back to me, so it's cool.
That's nice. So you have to tell me about that sometime.
Okay.
So I want to start there with sort of your philosophical leanings. Okay, so you're a pretty deep thinker. So yes, you are the father of EDA, and everybody knows you're a super smart guy, but it goes deeper than that. I mean, you're really quite a deep thinker on both business side as well, I think, as the personal side. So one of the things that you championed at Synopsys was this mind frame of yes, if, rather than no, but.
No, because.
No, because.
No, because, yeah.
Okay, no, because. All right.
No, but works pretty well too, actually.
Okay, all right, so that's my new saying. Anyway, so tell me a little bit about why you adopted that and what does it really mean and how did you see sort of a transformation within Synopsys just because of a different mindset?
Yeah, you know, actually it started, I think, 2017, 18. I had noticed that the company had become more stodgy. And maybe the reality is I had become more stodgy. And oh, yes. Yeah, no. It's very easy to become more no change oriented. Yeah. And essentially we were doing fine, but our profitability had not really grown. And so somehow it occurred to me that there were so many reasons that we couldn't do this. No, because, and so on. And suddenly one day I realized, hey, we have an enemy. It's no, because. And what's our friend? Yes, if. And, you know, the ifs and the becauses are actually sort of the same. Mm-hmm. But the mindset change to go to a yes, if from a no, because is actually extremely fundamental because it opens doors, whereas every no, because essentially closes them. And so I sort of announced to the company that I'm going to try to do this change. Sounded a little bit esoteric maybe, but then for the entire 2019, I did tours and roundtables with small groups of employees in front of, let's say, 100 or 200 other employees. And I would pick people that were sort of lower middle management, but that had a little, a little spark.
Okay.
And essentially asked them, hey, what do you think of this? And it was completely improvised. There was nothing to read or so. And very quickly, it started to take some form. And I knew the first little success was when somebody reported, hey, I talked with my kids at dinner about it. And they got it immediately. And they also immediately diagnosed us, the parents, as being so no because. And kids are like that, of course, because kids are open-minded to many, many ideas. And from there, it moved forward pretty quickly. Maybe the second moment that I knew we had something was when it was a young lady, a young manager, who was in one of those groups of 3 or 4 people. And she reported that, they had a group meeting on some project that didn't go anywhere. And it wasn't, this didn't work and that didn't work. And they were completely stuck. And she said, and I know that when she told me that, she was a little insecure if she could do that. She said, well, and then somebody at the table said, let's try this stupid art thing, that's that yes if. And she said exactly, I loved it because it showed that she had courage, for starters. But more importantly, what she said afterwards is, we tried it and suddenly the dynamics changed. Mm-hmm. And that's when I learned a lesson, is that the no because to yes if transition is not just a personal thing or a project one, or it is a group one. Because very often we are all stuck in our own no becauses, but when you tell somebody else on a yes if basis, the other person often can solve some of the ifs. And that's when it started to take off.
Right. Any specific concrete examples of something that happened that
there's a massive concrete example, because we coupled it with what we called at that time the rule of 40. And the rule of 40 was the addition of the growth rate of revenue and the profitability. Okay. And we were well below 40 and said, we're going to move in that direction, which is a very measurable thing. And if you look at our results, starting literally in 2019, you can see a break in the curve of profitability and a line that for many years then continued to go up. And, of course, this was the work of many, many people that all had their own yes-if change vectors to execute on. But that mindset change, for me, it turned into an insight that I've had the opportunity to use with so many people. And by the way, I meet a very no because person almost every day. Right. Early on. It's called the mirror. And there the guy is with yet another set of no becauses. And I've somewhat learned to say, no, today not. I'm going to be yes if. I'll figure it out.
Practice what you preach.
Practice what you preach. And preaching is it's really a role model ultimately, right?
Right. And what about applying it to your personal life?
It very much applies, because when you are a CEO, as you know, there are so many things that are fundamentally conflicting in urgency, in importance, in who to deal with, in what decisions to make. And consistently asking oneself the question is, what is actually between the yes and the if? Yes, we can do this if. And by the way, it's not just if, right? It's if, right? There's always a slew of those. And by daring to look a little bit more like a child towards the future, anything is possible. One actually comes in with an energy level that actually opens doors.
Right. Energy being very important in our industry, right?
Now especially. And I'm sure we'll get back to that later.
Yes, more than one meaning there.
Yeah.
Okay, so another quote that I love from you is that if you have the brains to understand, you should have the heart to lead. And you've recently added, and the courage to act. So what does that triad look like?
Well, here too, it's an old history in many ways, partially because one of the great benefits I got by being early in Synopsys, other people actually essentially pushed and told me that caring for others in the community is actually important. I grew up with parents that, yeah, they would give some money to people, but we were not, we didn't have much money, and it was not really learned, right? And suddenly I discovered as a CEO, you not only have the opportunity, but you also, in my opinion, have a necessity and a responsibility to look at the circles around the company, which initially were things such as simple as, a second harvest in Silicon Valley. The very fact that today there are many hundreds of thousands of people in Silicon Valley that have not enough to eat is a surprising situation, you would say. And it was sort of a surprise to me too at that time. But out of that came sort of this notion of think beyond yourself. And I must have heard or coined this terminology of they who have the brains to understand should have the heart to help. And that was really through all of these years became gradually a mantra, because I saw here's this super intense industry, the high-tech industry, and specifically, of course, in our case, semiconductors. And actually, there are a lot of brains. And in all fairness, for top leaders, there's no time, because we're sitting on this exponential of change that you need to constantly be on. And still, if you have the brains, you should do some helping. And so I use that within the company. And it's then years later that I realized there are also other force fields, and we have seen this in the last 7-8 years in the global situation, that suddenly there's scary things happening around us. And then suddenly it becomes, well, you should also have the courage to act. And courage has to come with some wisdom. There's no point in sort of making some claims and then be shut down or so. But it is necessary for people that have this fantastic responsibility of leading a company or an organization to say, we think for the long term. We think broader than ourselves.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about your philanthropy, but obviously you take this again and apply it to your personal life, that we do have a big responsibility as individuals.
We do, and over time, obviously, Synopsys has done well. Therefore, we have done well as a family, and there too, in philanthropy, over time becomes important to actually realize there are many, many, many great causes. The question is, and I think one should give broadly, but at the same time, if you have the opportunity to give more or even participate in certain things, it's useful to understand which ones will have the biggest long-term impact. And therefore, it's also useful to understand who are the leaders and how do they act. Because, leading an NGO, a non-government organization, is a really tough job.
Right.
And I can tell you, I've met some people that were just extraordinarily good. Fantastic.
Yeah. I have as well. And I think that what you were saying earlier about that you didn't really learn it necessarily as a child. It was one of the number one priorities for me when I was raising children.
Yes.
And we started going to Haiti when my kids were like 9 years old, 9 and 11.
Yes.
Started going. So what about your family? Did you really try to breed that into your children?
In a milder form.
Okay.
Early on, actually, I took both of our young daughters at that time to the distribution of food of Second Harvest. And what they saw, they were very quiet afterwards. Because it was, I think, one of those moments of realizing, there are other challenges in the world. The training is not over for our children who are adults now,
Right.
because over time they have to participate more, and they will, and they are learning well.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a good lesson. So one of the other lessons that I remember, and actually it was something that you told me, and I have used this so often, and I've quoted you, and I give you credit.
Well, you don't have to get ready.
And that
now
is,
I'm wondering what it is.
No, that is that people determine the value of a meeting by how often they hear their voice. And for my job, when I'm managing a group of CEOs, that has played an incredibly important role. And I think about it all the time. And it's not hearing their voices for the sake of hearing their voices, right? It's not an ego thing. People want to be heard. So do you still believe that? Do you remember that? Do you remember telling me that?
Yeah, I remember that, and it's quite a while ago, because my thinking has evolved a little bit. Because I realize often people are very stressed when they have to speak up in an environment that has maybe other great people and so on. And so there's a reason they remember only what they said, because that's the highest intensity moment.
Right.
I would add something to that now, which is that in any group, and that includes the two of us, the listening part is just as important. And then the third thing is, can you make the other person feel an inch taller by the time the meeting is over? And in music and sometimes jazz gets stereotyped too, and you hear sentences like, really work well on the silences. What the hell does that mean? Well, actually, listening in a band is a fantastic thing. And it's just as hard because, I'm concentrated on making sure I make no mistakes. And when I do that, I'm not listening to the other band members. But when I'm relaxed enough so that I'm not worried about my own mistakes, and let's say, for argument's sake, I'll put you as the drummer, and suddenly you do a little thing, and I hear that the organ player picks up that same little accent. Suddenly everybody wakes up. And if then I can do something that increases that accent, now suddenly the band is cruising, right? Call it being in the pocket. And that means suddenly you're together. And whenever you can do that in a meeting, and again, yes, if works with that, because solving a bad if is a really big yes. And if it's clear that, we solved it together, I brought up a problem, I really didn't know what to do, and you say, yeah, but go left instead of right, and suddenly it's, oh, wow, I hadn't thought about that. The very fact that I recognize that you just gave me a little gift is a gift back to you, right? And so the dynamics of groups can be so improved if one were just the better listener. And, note to self, become still a better listener.
Right. Yeah, no, I think I remember, I don't know if you remember who Bob Pepper
Oh,
was
yes,
CEO of
yes.
Level One.
Great leader.
And he told me very early on, Jodi, I think your superpower is listening. I was like, really? I was so disappointed that was my superpower. And maybe ultimately he's right.
Yeah, and listen and then do something with it that makes Bob Pepper proud that he told you something.
That's right. So you're in a position that you get to be around a lot of CEOs, myself as well. And what are some of the traits that you've seen consistently in very effective and very successful CEOs and leaders in general?
Well, that is an unbelievably broad topic, right? One of the characteristics that people don't often recognize is just the word perseverance. I'm always surprised that somebody who maybe was not the super smart one, was not the super well-placed one, but who didn't give up, actually became successful. And so perseverance is actually one of the key characteristics of being successful. Now, defining CEO by sort of the job attributes, I always start with the values. And the foundation of the values is integrity. And integrity is a big, three syllable word, but it can be easily translated in do what you say and say what you do. If you're there, you have the foundation of trust building. And sometimes what you do ends up not being so great, and then you have to say that too, right? And so in my value pyramid, that is absolutely the foundation. Now at the top, I put something very different, which is passion. The passion for what you do, and probably that's also one of the reasons that gives people a drive to move forward. But passion is contagious. And the people that have that and then can surround themselves with not only compliment to themselves, but also people that can build each other up is one of the characteristics that really great CEOs have. And, earlier when you say, oh, Art, you did this or that with the company, it is always we. It is always we. And actually, earlier, didn't we not briefly discuss how important it is to have somebody who is a contrarian?
Right.
Somebody who actually say, hey, real mirror here.
Right.
Watch this thing here.
You're truth tellers.
You're truth tellers. And there's some that are always on the no because side. But even that, The skill is to take their because thing and turn it in a positive if, and then do whatever yes we can around that. But we all have limited capabilities. And so you become really who you surround yourself with. And if you're willing to have opposites or people that think more broadly or have different skills, they're a gift. They're absolutely fantastic gift.
Right, right. So were there any traits that you found important as a leader that you really didn't have naturally, that you had to either earn or learn over time?
Yeah, yeah. I always feel and still feel right now that I'm a fraud. that I know so much less than I wish I had. I wish I had done some MBA. I wish I'd actually pay attention in engineering class. I wish I had spent more attention earlier to health. But at the same time, can say, no, that's not a good attitude. This is old stuff that by being confronted in high responsibility or high leverage situations, hopefully you learn how to do better. But I've heard from a number of other people that are very intense in their domain, this notion of, deep down I'm a fraud. I'm faking it until I know how to do it for real. And you can also say, hey, that's the courage to do some bets, to try something.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting because, you often hear about women having imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah, that's what it's called, right?
Yeah, so now I'm talking to one of the most successful CEOs in the world who
No,
also
no,
has
no.
imposter syndrome. So it's very interesting because it can be debilitating for some people.
Are you an imposter?
Oh, maybe. I mean, please, I'm sitting in a room of people that, are twice as educated as I am, 3 times as smart. So of course I'm like the real imposter, but you know what? It's still fun.
So here's why I will argue that you're not. It has not much to do with education. It has not much to do with all these other skills. People may have other skills than you have, or in some areas better, in some areas not. But you have passion. You have passion for excellence. You have passions for learning, for improving things. That is what matters. That's what matters.
Yeah. Well, at least I have that.
Not at least. That's a lot. That's a lot to have.
So you went through a transition at Synopsys where you handed over the role as CEO to Sassine Ghazi, and you're now the executive chair at Synopsys.
What's the name of the guy again?
Sassine.
It sounds familiar. Yeah?
So he must have those characteristics. Okay, so that's, maybe go through the criteria that, that you went through in choosing him to basically, trust him with your life's work. And then maybe how did you know it was time?
Okay. I don't trust him. It's my life's work because it wasn't my life. It was our life work. And actually, 25 years, he was part of that to build this. But how do you trust somebody with the future of the company? And I mentioned some of the criteria from the values point of view, but actually let me use sort of the definition of vitality that I like to use. And I like to define vitality in 3 lines. The first one is both the ability and the drive, and you can replace the word drive with persistence or energy. It takes actually hard work and literally also physical persistence to do this. So ability and drive to learn, adapt, and collaborate. Without learning, you're nowhere in our field. And actually in many fields, you're nowhere, because we know not only do we still live on exponential, we live on a whole bunch of exponentials right now. And so the speed of learning and the quality of learning is absolutely essential. Secondly, you can learn a lot academically, then decide, well, I've learned it. The adaptation is really turning it into the practice of things. And then the third one is collaboration. What we do is not possible as individuals. Everything we do is a team, and it's not an additive team. It's a multiplicative team. A single person fails on something important, we all fail together. And great example is just in semiconductors. It doesn't matter if Synopsys made a mistake in the tool, or the designer made a mistake in using the tools, or the manufacturing made a mistake in manufacturing the thing. The 3 of us, we all fail.
Right.
And that's a multiplication, not an addition, right? And once one understands this notion of multiplication, there's something very profound, which is most of the things we deal with are not scale complexity issues. They are systemic complexity issues. Many things are interwoven. And so in this ability to learn, adapt, and collaborate, those three words try to capture both that sophistication and the necessity to continually be on the ball. And of course, we do learn, adapt, and collaborate in order to survive and thrive. And a lot of CEO work is surviving, just in so many ways, personally, as a team, as a company, as circumstances change, as geopolitics hammers one, whatever it is, you're still there. So that's the vitality. And I would consider the learning the principal one because it's the starting point. And what was very clear to me already many years ago, about 15 years ago, was clear that Sassine was an outstanding learner. And, just looking at now the last 18 months, he has had to learn a lot of stuff that was yet different than anything we had done before.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of regulatory and geopolitical complexities when he was trying to get the ANSYS deal done. And so what did you teach, not necessarily to Sassine, but teach the culture and the leadership at Synopsys of how to handle that kind of pressure?
Well, and it's sort of Synopsys, but it's also in the specific case of Sassine, is that I had thought about succession a long time ago, and was always looking for, where is their potential talent, and preferably from the inside, because it reduces risk substantially. And so part of not so much the teaching as the enabling teaching was to, over time, help him be in different positions in the company. And at some point in time, so he was sort of spiraling gradually up. And by the time he became COO and then later CEO and president, it became clearer and clearer, hey, something's happening here. And all of those steps was learning, partially with my advice, but a lot of that was also just, put him in the situation and actually don't say much. And that was actually difficult for me to step back because a number of people started thinking, Aart has nothing to say anymore and so on. That was unbelievably difficult to not say, the answer is this, or we should do that and so on, but let him speak first and drive things. But having said that, in the process, it was clear to me that he was a fantastic choice. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot more he has to learn. And as you said, the geopolitical challenges started well before that, about 6-7 years ago, with challenges between the US and China. And then there was another form of geopolitical or geo-period issues, which was, of course, COVID. That was a big challenge in many ways. But that's a great example of systemic complexity becoming even more systemic. And so one of my criteria is, can people understand systemic complexity somewhat intuitively and deal with it without being overwhelmed?
This episode is brought to you by Needham & Company. George Needham founded Needham & Company with the vision to be one of the leading investment banks to the semiconductor industry. Most founders pivot, but for more than 40 years, Needham has been part of the fabric of the semiconductor industry and has partnered for decades with industry leaders like Applied Materials, Intel, Lam Research, and Synopsys. Having had a front row seat for numerous cycles, Needham has never felt stronger about the industry's short and long-term prospects and looks forward to continued partnering with today's and tomorrow's industry leaders. Let's get back to the episode.
Right, yeah. That's a perfect lead into the next topic, which is sort of the state of the world today.
Okay.
And, how, whether it is the geopolitics, whether it is our consumption of social media or our consumption of news. And it seems that technology has created so many benefits for humanity. But there
some
are
challenges,
a lot
yes.
of both unintended and maybe in some cases intended consequences when you think about social media, for example.
Yeah.
So what's your advice on, how we can live a more soulful existence with all this chaos and turmoil and all the white noise?
Yes, I think it's an extraordinarily difficult question that you're asking here because many of the forces that you're describing are much bigger than individuals. They're also much bigger than even groups that don't know what they have unleashed and where it's going. Although I must say, hey, if I look at my parents, when the Cuba crisis happened, which was the early 60s, that sounded overwhelmingly big too. And it could have been, right? And, every generation has had essentially these, certainly in the last 200 years, these waves of technology or new capabilities or warfare that have shocked humanity. And some of the shocks were ended up being positive. But many things, change is painful in general, even if it's positive change. If you take the steam engine, well, for all the people that had horses to drive some stuff or so, suddenly the train destroyed that. And over time you say, well, it's more efficient and there's advances, but the transition is what's actually most difficult. And we're seeing this right now. There's an unbelievably high degree of hunger for more energy. And yet we all know that right now a large amount of the energy produces emissions that are catastrophic for humanity. And so there's a transition that's needed. Well, transition, I think it was Maggie Thatcher even that said, it has to get worse before it gets better. And all CEOs know the simple question, never let a good crisis go unused. And there's some truth to that. But also never forget of the people that in the crisis are actually the ones that get hurt. And if one sees it that way, now one can start turning it into a yes if. If we understand that this transformation will lead to these people or these entities to be harmed, what can we do preemptively about it? And just by putting it into the if set, we have broadened our own systemic understanding to something where leadership is actually worthy.
Right. So one of the things, again, that social media has, one of the problems that it has caused is this kind of constant comparison versus contribution. But the other thing is that you're pigeonholed into believing one thing, and then you're fed that information sort of over and over again. And we've heard about these algorithms doing that. And so it becomes very difficult to change one's mind about something. In our industry, we're pretty used to changing. I mean, we have to be flexible about everything. You change on a dime. I mean, this year doesn't look anything like last year, and it certainly doesn't look like it did 5 or 10 years ago. So maybe what's something that you've changed your mind about that actually took persuasion from either someone else or some other group that, that you're proud that you were mature enough and progressive enough to sort of change your mind about it?
Yet another one of those very difficult questions, because when do you know it's just learning versus when do you know, no, I actually was fundamentally stuck on a model that was too simplistic of the world. And so, just maybe reusing an example that we talked about earlier, this notion of how is it possible that Silicon Valley needs multiple services that provide food? Was that just being blind? Was it just, I had not seen that? Or was it actually a naive version of understanding of the world? And, if I look at, let's say, the great American adventure since World War II, the immense success of the country in actually bringing up one of the highest standard of living is somewhat touched by the fact that there are a lot of people in this country that are below an acceptable standard of living, and that one of the most remarkable countries in the history of certainly the last 100 years has not been able to deal with that. And I'm part of that. I'm part of the industry that's been successful, that has been changing all of these things. And all of these questions, by the way, now are greatly amplified through the whole question, so what's AI going to do about this? And well, there's some remarkable great successes, and there's some remarkable awful stories already about what it could do. But at the end of the day, it's us. It's us that decide, us humans, that decide how we deal with the world. And so I think the increase of saying it's our responsibility, actually that's another way of adding, the brain's too hard to courage. to action, right? To action.
Right.
I think I'm still learning. I'm still learning. And the question is learning how to be effective in this.
Right. So we were talking earlier about that I had recently reread Clayton Christensen's book, How to Measure Your Life. And I mean, it's a great book. But one of the things that he brings up is that where you spend your time and resources, that reflects what your real values are. Like we may think we believe one thing, but if you're not spending your time or resources on it, then you probably really don't believe that. So what do you spend your time and resources on that you believe, that you fundamentally believe aligns with your values?
Well, and I look at this synopsis time and the now different synopsis time, because at the beginning there was almost no choice. As a young CEO and then as a not so young CEO who was the same, who was like no choice on time. I think you and I remember vaguely E-Times, which was a newspaper at that time before the internet, about our industry, right, of semiconductors. And that thing would arrive, I forget which day of the week. And the first thing I would go very quickly through it. What horrible thing has just happened that could endanger us as a company? It was always this paranoia of tomorrow. And I've never lost that. And I think only the paranoid survive was Andy Grove's gift to bookdom, I guess.
Yes.
And there's some truth to that. And so the reality is, how much choice do you have over your time? And so if Christensen says, yeah, but you have to take choice, you have to make choices, he's absolutely right about that. And I would say, oh, well, I have to spend better time with my family. And, I'm thankful the fact that both our now grown-up daughters have become really good people. But, at some point in time was like, okay, here's the little tag I have on my shirt when I come home from yet another trip, say, your dad, I'm your dad. Just remember that, right? And the stress and the jet lag and all of that were difficult. Now, in the next phase now, where I'm essentially really the top supporter of Sassine by being chair, I spend the rest of my time on a whole new quest. And the whole new quest is actually to understand the systemic complexity of energy and climate. Now, I'm already starting to modify it and wanting to say AI, energy, and climate, because AI is such a forcing function of change right now, which is both a potential issue and potential opportunity to use that to drive different energy considerations. And the reason I'm so vested in that is because I can easily see why what's happening on the emission side is heading straight to a massive human catastrophe. And therefore, we have to find a way to bend that curve in a different direction. That's back to the earlier talk. It's so difficult to actually transition things, right? Because it gets worse before it gets better. And so trying to dedicate as much time I can on that is in the category of the topics. But the other angle to your question is, or Christensen's assessment, is not just which time, is which people. And that goes back to, I think, lessons that I wish I had learned earlier. But at the end of the day, often people, let's say, that want to go to college, they have all these expectations. You have to write an essay on what you're going to do with your life and why it's worthy to come to our university and stuff like that. And they have no clue. They have no clue. And they're almost panicky. And I've changed my advice there towards saying, hey, just pick the people you really like, people that you respect, the professor that was able to make you an inch taller just because you're excited about something. And until you know what your passion is going to be and how you may or may not make a difference around you, align yourself with people you think are great. And I think that is really good advice.
Yeah, I think that, I think it was Tom Friedman many years ago at the U.S. Executive Forum said that, this generation would have like 7 different occupations in their lifetime.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and if you do, then that means that you can miss on the first couple of them.
Yeah, and I would, and Tom is really good at putting it in very tight little sentences, right? I would say, don't use the word miss on a few of them. if you could really learn and experiment,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And it's actually our fear of being amiss that stops us
Right.
from being open-minded and learning. Just like my fear of playing the wrong note makes me not listen to
Right.
what our keyboard player just did.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect analogy. So, okay, so I want to touch a little bit more on fatherhood. Okay, so,
Oh, okay.
because I think that, I hear kids now, and both men and women, say, I don't even want to have children because, just the kinds of choices that have to be made. Again, men and women. So, how did you sort of protect fatherhood, and what advice do you have for someone sort of starting their career on how you manage that and still have a close relationship with your children and have an impact?
Well, there's sort of the stuff I did, but even more the stuff I wish I did, right?
Okay.
And I wish in hindsight that I had more often at dinner talked about what I actually do. At the same time, I look back and I say I had no ability to do that because after, I don't know, 12 half hour or 14 half hour meetings, you're completely zapped. And still, the few stories I told, the few things, they did pick up.
Right.
And of course, they look like they're not listening at all, right? But they still hear it. They still hear it. And so, and I have the good fortune to have as a spouse somebody who is equally passionate about her work. She works in cancer epidemiology and is a researcher and publishes papers. And so she has an understanding for what it's like when she is under stress and yet another grant proposal or paper is due, next Monday, and there's essentially no sleep and just finish those things. And so we have been able to support each other. But I think what our kids learned out of that is a certain degree of intensity and passion. And in different forms, they have found their own way to say, oh, I don't want to be like my parents, for starters. They're working way too hard. But at the same time, be very balanced and good people. And so I don't know that I knew the recipe, but there's no question in my mind that children are the greatest gift you can get. And sometimes it's not your own children. Sometimes if you don't have children, there's some other child around that can be helped and that can greatly benefit from some act of love or attention.
This episode is brought to you by GSME. GSME is a leading global provider of tailored silicon solutions dedicated to empowering semiconductor and system companies with cutting-edge technology and unparalleled expertise, founded in 2022 by Farhat Jahangir. Its comprehensive range of services include end-to-end chip design, full turnkey manufacturing capabilities, rigorous quality assurance, and strategic incubation to help its partners bring innovative products to market. At GSME, they are committed to transforming semiconductor manufacturing landscape by optimizing processes, accelerating product development cycles, and ensuring faster time to market for next generation applications. GSME gives full visibility of the supply chain to its customers. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, I like this whole idea of sort of the integration of both your professional life and your personal life so that your children do have some understanding. I see people
Yes.
doing that more now. So then, again, to get a bit personal. So tell me a little bit about how you made it work with two ambitious people in the home, highly successful, highly passionate about what they do. How did you maneuver that? I remember the CEO of PepsiCo, I recently listened to a podcast that she did, and she said that her husband thought, PepsiCo, children, my mother, then all these things, and the husband came dead last. And so, it's easy to put your spouse dead last. So how did you guys avoid that? You're still married, so you must have avoided it.
Yeah, well, but you just send me into the ultimate guilt trip of all the things that I could have and should have done better. And so, let me just highlight first that my wife is maybe the greatest gift that I got and not always appreciated sufficiently for that, because he somehow found an understanding of, this guy, whatever he does, he won't stop because that's who he is. And it's more over time that I've gotten to appreciate how many steps she took to make that possible, and put herself on a back burner, that once the kids were out of the house, suddenly I saw the intensity that she had. And so in hindsight, I wish I'd been able to be more supportive of her career earlier on, but she made our family successful. And I don't want to go too far into the guilt trip, because flowers won't do, right?
Right.
This is much deeper than that.
Right. Well, does she get to spend more time with you now, or it's equally as challenging?
Actually, in a weird way, one of the best experiences as I look back was COVID.
Yes.
We were in the same house, and we met 17 times crossing at the kitchen.
And were your children here too?
No, they were not.
Okay.
They were not.
Okay.
They're in their 30s,
Okay.
and so COVID was 5 years ago. So, and suddenly we had brief lunches together, just sitting outdoors, and I think it matured, maybe matured just me. I probably needed more maturing, but it was actually a way to learn how to do things differently.
Right. Yeah.
It's been good.
I think that if something good came of COVID, it was family time in many cases.
For some, and for some it
some,
was the
just the
opposite, right? It was
opposite.
the big challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears and talk a little bit more about jazz. Okay. So you've already
Okay.
given a few examples of how it
Yeah.
influenced your leadership, but maybe a little bit more about how it has impacted your life and how you lead. And
Well, sometimes I joke, or maybe don't joke, and say, hey, leading a band is a lot harder than leading a company. And partially it's not a joke, because creative people have an ability to turn a corner when you don't expect it to happen. And actually, one of the coolest thing, I'm still learning that as a band, is, and we're interesting, and this is now management from Synopsys coming into the band saying, oh, let's talk about this. And let's make it sort of clear that one of the rules is, if somebody makes a mistake while we're playing a gig, the role of the rest of the band is to make that mistake go away, not look at, why did you do that? And, we all make mistakes. And interestingly enough, the singer is the person that needs to be protected most. It's sort of like the queen in chess or something like that. And I would never say that she makes mistakes. I just say, oh, she made a decision to not go to the chorus, but to what's called the bridge.
Okay.
Right? And the whole band goes, did we just go to the bridge? What happened? What happened here, right? Our job is to, in zero time, redo the chords, figure out what to do so that she sounds great. And being able to voice that explicitly, brought many jokes about it. And the singer says, do you mean I make mistakes? No, we all make those, but this is the playing together. This is the notion of we're a multiplication, not an addition. And it's been cool to see how the band has done well with that. And we all make mistakes like this from time to time. And the more we can do that together, that's not any different than a good exec team. Right. An exec team shines when when we are in a bad spot, and we turn all yes-if as hard as we possibly can on each other.
Right. Yeah, I get that. So when you were young, you met one of your jazz idols.
Yeah, Barney Kessle. Is that the story?
Yes, that's the story. So
yeah.
Tell us about meeting him and maybe how it impacted and changed your thought process.
Well, so I'm in undergrad in Switzerland. I grew up mostly in Switzerland. I was undergrad, and nearby a town called Montreux, which is well known for its jazz festival, Montreux Jazz Festival, the Lake of Geneva. And I had been to a couple of concerts there before, and I had learned one thing, which is, hey, when they open the doors, if you're close to the doors, you run like crazy because it's open seating.
Okay.
And if you're really fast, you can make it to the first or second row. Don't go for the first row, because if you're on the first row, you will suddenly find it's all reserved. Go for the second row. That's as close as you can get, right, to the musicians. So then there was this guy, Barney Kessle, who was really a great jazz guitar player from the very first generation. So his first records are like 1940s, that far back. And he was going to play, and I needed to go see that. And I had one record by him, and I'd read the back cover like 40 times while listening to it. And so I went so early that the doors were not closed yet. And so it was sort of dark, and I can still today see it. Towards the left along a hallway, there was some light and some sounds, and I sort of just moseyed in. And to my great surprise, it turned out it was a cocktail party. Not that I knew at that time what a cocktail party was, but people standing around with some glass talking to each other. And it turns out it was the release cocktail party of a record by Barney Kessle. So it was the recording company had organized that. And so I'm sort of looking around, and suddenly, right there, I see him. And at that point in time, my whole body changed sort of. I started to do sort of this random walk, interesting ceiling. And meanwhile, my internal I'm laser guided to get closer and closer and closer to this guy. And so I'm sort of standing there, and suddenly our eyes meet. And he had dark, very forceful eyes.
Okay.
And I just blurted out, and I couldn't speak English very well at that time. I just blurted out, "Mr. Kessle, how do you practice?" And he was so magnanimous. "Oh, that's easy. You find some people that are better than you play with them, and you practice until you're just as good. And then you find some people that are better than you, and you practice until you're just as good. And then a third time. You find some people that are still better than you, and you practice until you're just as good. And then, when you cannot find anybody, you come see me, and you teach me."
I love it.
And the reason I know exactly, about 15, 18 years or so ago, I found in one of my notebooks, little, like you do when you're adolescent, you glue stuff in, you write things down, little poem, that kind of stuff. I had written down exactly what he said, the 3 times. And to me, the magic of his closure, all these years later, was sort of the essence of learning combined with the essence of humility. Such beautiful sentence. And then you teach me.
Right.
And I think that for me suddenly sealed the whole notion of what learning is all about. It is actually cherishing the fact that one is not as good as what could be, that there are other people that are so fantastic around one. And it also consolidated this whole notion of just don't look for your own passion. The passion will come at an unexpected moment. Surround yourself by people that are great, people that are humble themselves, people that are generous, role models.
That's what I've done. Look who I get to be around.
Well,
It's great.
it's mutual. It's mutual.
So I want to end by asking you, when it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want the industry to remember you? How do you want your family and humanity to remember you?
Well, I don't think humanity is going to matter so much.
You could make a big difference on climate. So,
Well, no, I haven't. See, that's the problem with that's the.
but you still have time.
Still have time. Well, I'll work hard on it.
Okay.
But and I don't know if I'm worth remembering, but it's a difficult question, because if I think what I actually cherish most is if I hear later, and sometimes I do hear that I inspired somebody. It is sort of and also I love discussions like this because we're both learning, right, at the same time. And yes, you have put the focus a little bit too much on me, but the fact is, it's in discussions like this that one sharpens one's own understanding, while hopefully making the other person find, oh, there's something that changes my life. Mm-hmm. And so inspiring people, making them an inch taller, and I feel horrible to say I've many times made them an inch smaller, and not always been great at this, but nonetheless, doing something that inspires people to be bigger and better in some form or other is probably the one thing that I would be most thankful if that was the epitaph on the stone or whatever at the end.
Well, you have one person you've inspired, so
Well, thank you. Thank you.
thank you
Very
for doing
generous.
this with me. This has been fun. So let me ask you this. I'm going to get to this last portion, which we call the last tape out. So I'm going to just
The last tape out.
the last
okay.
tape out.
Yeah,
Very-
the
yeah.
tape better be good.
That's right. And I'm going to ask you some questions, you quick answer. But before I do that,
All right.
think about a question for one of our future guests on the show. So one of them is going to be Lisa Sue.
Okay.
So what should I ask Lisa Sue? What would you like to ask Lisa Sue? Maybe they're the same.
Well, Lisa is a person I greatly admire, and so one wants to ask somebody about something that's actually difficult. And I want to say she has done two very great things already, which is she essentially restored a company that was heading from disaster to utter disaster, i.e. down the drain. And in that sense, she became the CEO that fixed it to being viable. Then she became the CEO that established a whole new position for that company back in industry, where it was no longer a number two player or distant number two player, but became a real player. That is an unbelievable accomplishment in its own, and essentially had rebuilt the company to be viable and then build it to become a very strong company. So strong, actually, that with that comes an immensely difficult challenge, which is now the whole world is changing again, partially helped by what she and a number of other great leaders in our industry have done, which is enable this whole AI++ world. And with it comes all the questions about energy, all the questions that you had about media influencing us, AI now maybe tricking us and what have you. But most importantly, how will she learn when there are no teachers? There are no people that are that far ahead. Right. Of course, she can learn from competitors and so on, and that is a way to learn. But how will she learn? Or is it no, the specifics don't matter as much as the fundamentals, which she has many of.
Okay. All right. Well, we will let her know that. So I'm going to ask you these quick questions. And
okay.
You can take as long as you want to answer them. But
okay. Well.
All right. So the first is, who's the smartest person you ever met?
Well, smart is not the same as intelligent. And, one person comes up to mind. I spent, as an adolescent, every summer on a farm. And, the farmer, who was also a bit of an entrepreneur in that village, was maybe 15 years older than I am. So it was sort of more of a big brother or a second father, if you like. And he was pretty down to earth on things, including the vocabulary that when it rained, it was not a little rain, it was always a catastrophe of rain and so on. Because people that work on real farms, on real things that have to do with feeding a village, the animals and all that, they really know about reality. And I've learned probably more on that farm on management than any other place, certainly before I became a manager.
Okay, I love that. So what is a misconception that people have about you?
Well, often people ask me, are you not proud of this and that and achievements and so on? And the misconception is I am completely focused on tomorrow, not yesterday. I'm always interested. By moment a problem sort of semi goes away, I'm already on to the next thing. And, actually I learned this lesson one more time during the passing the baton to Sassine, because once I announced it, there were so many people that were humbling so thankful, and letters and phone calls, and some people said, "Can I meet you one last time?" And I was thinking, have they talked to my doctor? Do they know that, am I dying or what's happening? And it became in all the so humbling thank yous, I was more and more depressed until I understood something. Every single one speaks in passive voice, in past tense. You did this, you had that, you worked this, thank you for, and so on. And the very few that look at and what's next, sort of, it's so great that now you don't have to work so hard and you can go play golf or something that for me is horrible, but okay, nothing wrong with golf. But was so interested in, so no, I want to be doing something that's newly challenging. And not, be on a zillion boards or so, but something truly where you don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Right. Okay. So what is your favorite vacation spot?
Well, I think what makes my vacation spots favorite is the people I'm with.
Yeah.
It's the people I'm with. And frankly, any spot can become favorite because some stupid little restaurant somewhere where we just talk to the night is just as great as being on the highest mountain and have the world around us, which is fantastic too. It's all who you do it with.
Okay. Yep. Makes sense. So what is your pet peeve?
No, because that is pretty easy.
Yes.
I cannot stand that.
Okay. So what is your go-to coffee order? You do coffee?
Well, my adult daughters would think of me as a coffee Neanderthaler because I go instant coffee, some creamer, and some sweetener. Okay, done.
Okay.
That's a level of sophistication.
Okay. All right. Okay, so this is an interesting question. If you had to be 20 again, would you choose to be 20 today, or would you wish to be 20 when you were growing up?
It's not if you had to. I am 20 again. I am absolutely
You're like
20
me.
again.
I always say that I have age dysmorphia. So
This is more. I am 20 partially because being 20 means trying and doing stuff where you actually don't know what the outcome is going to be, where it may be crazy to even hope for it. There is a timeline that's sticking backwards from life, but I'm still looking at my driver's license and I want to scratch out the number. So
yes.
I am 20 right now this minute.
Okay. Well, I'm 20 with you.
Fantastic.
Right. Just fun 20-year-olds. So thanks for doing this with me.
Oh, thanks for the honor of having this done.
Good. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.